Hey, today I'm going to show you why you should come to Daisy Hill Koala Centre in Brisbane, and also how to make sure that you come away with some really great koala photos. The first reason you should come to Daisy Hill Koala Centre is that unlike Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary, Daisy Hill is completely free. The second reason you should visit Daisy Hill Koala Centre is that everything is done with the koala's welfare in mind. So that's why, unlike some other places, you can't actually hold a koala to have your photo taken, because actually it does cause stress to the animals. Also, the amount of koalas in the enclosures is limited to just 3 or 4 in a large enclosure, again for the mental health, I suppose, of the koalas themselves. So I really respect that. They're really doing this as, number one, a way to educate people about koalas, not a money-making scheme, and also to really look after the koalas themselves. I'm not saying that the other places do not care for the animals. I'm not saying that they're not also there with the purpose of caring for the animals and helping to increase their numbers and all of those things. But definitely this centre is really there with the koalas' interests completely at the centre. You may say, hey Adam, but keeping them in captivity, how is that keeping their interests at the centre? Well, actually the females in the centre they had chlamydia, which led to them getting cysts in their reproductive system, which had to be removed, and that left them infertile. So releasing them into the wild would mean that male koalas would be mating with infertile females, therefore not really increasing numbers in the wild. And that is an issue because koalas are a vulnerable population in Australia. The numbers are dropping. In some areas, they've dropped by as much as 80% in recent years. So we really need to make sure that they can breed and that they can continue, increasing the population rather than having the population reduced. This is a major issue. A lot of the habitat that they regularly live in has been cleared for housing and development, so they really are in danger. So keeping the infertile females in the centre is actually good for the koala population as a whole. And the male koala in the centre, Jordan, he was actually found, his mother died while he was still in the pouch. And so they raised him, they tried to train him and prepare him for life in the wild. And they have, I guess, a halfway house for koalas, where they reduce the human contact and try to let them learn to live as they would in the wild. Well, Jordan failed 3 times, so he just wouldn't have survived in the wild. So they've kept him in the centre as well. Another great thing about Daisy Hill is that they've got this nature reserve where you can actually take a nice walk through the forest, and there's little educational things for kids that they can do and try along the way as well. All right, let's try this thing out. Pick a number, 1 to 8. Let's go 5.
Please turn me till the message plays. What animal makes this bellowing sound? A koala. Both male and female koalas can make this deep, vocal call, but it's usually made by males looking to attract a female mate. Sounds are one way that animals can make themselves attractive to their mates. What are some other ways?
I don't know, maybe a sexy dress? Makeup? Cosmetic surgery? I don't know. You tell me, you're the one with the knowledge. Nope. All right, let's try a different one. Let's see what number 1 is. Maybe 2.
What animal makes this creaky call?
So So let's just say you've come to the Daisy Hill Koala Centre and you want to take some really great photos. So how can you make sure that you get great koala photos to show people and help tell their story? Well, I think we need to go home for this. Okay, so I'm back home, so let's talk about how to take really good photos of the koalas. So let's just say you've gone there, you're taking photos. What do you do to ensure that you're going to get the best possible results? I'm not going to talk much about composition because you can always watch the video about composition when I visited Zhongtian Temple, but I will mention the depth of field. When you're shooting the koalas, there's likely to be lots of eucalyptus leaves and trees and things like that, and you really want the koalas to stand out from the background. So I really recommend using a very shallow depth of field so that everything in the background will kind of blur out while the koala is nice and sharp in focus. So to do that, you just need to use a very wide aperture. And to know a wide aperture on your camera, it's the smaller number, often with an F in front of it. So we call them f-stops. If you're not sure about that, always ask me in the comments. I'll explain it in a little bit more detail. Not going to dwell on it though. So if you're shooting with a mobile phone, however, you actually can't adjust the aperture. So you're just stuck with the aperture the phone has. When you're taking pictures of koalas, particularly when you're using that really wide aperture, you also need to be really careful to focus in the right place. So where do you focus? Rule number one when photographing animals is always focus on the eyes. But the biggest challenge that you're going to have when photographing koalas is going to be about the light. Because in Australia, the light is really harsh, it's very contrasty. So the difference between the really bright parts and the really dark parts, it's a big distance. And that can be difficult when you're photographing because our eyes can see a lot more different levels of light than the camera sensor is capable of recording. We can actually see about 30 stops of light, while a camera sensor, even the really good ones, can only record 14 or 15 stops. And also keeping in mind that when you're viewing the photos on a smartphone or on a computer, then the display is only likely to display about 14 stops of light as well. So that's something to be aware of, because what we're going to find is that when you're photographing the koalas, that there might be some really bright parts in the photo, and if you get the right level of brightness for those bright parts, then you'll find the shadow areas, which is probably where the koalas are going to actually be way too dark. So how do you balance all of this? Well, it really depends on what you're going to be doing with the photos after you've taken them. If you're just planning on sharing the photos straight away, you're not going to do any retouching, you're not going to use any programs to alter them in any way, then I really recommend that you expose a little bit brighter. Let me show you what I mean by that. This is a photo of one of the koalas at Daisy Hill. One of the good things about the center is that if you can't see the koalas from the viewing boardwalk that runs through their enclosure, you can actually go into the center, walk around and view them from the other side through the windows. So this is actually taken through one of those windows, quite close to the koala. So you'll see that there's some areas in the photo that are really, really bright. So let me just take you to those areas. Now, if I were to share this straight away, yeah, it's not bad. It's not a bad photo in terms of it being straight out of the camera without being edited. But if you have a look at these areas here, they're extremely bright, and they're actually so bright that the camera sensor has been unable to capture any detail there. It's just 100% white, all of the pixels in this area. Let me show you how I know that. This is what we call the histogram, this part in the top right-hand corner in Lightroom. This shows us all the different levels of brightness in the photo. On this side is the blacks, so the shadows, the dark parts, blacks and shadows. are the darkest part of the photo. Then we go across the midtones, and then we have the highlights and the whites. The whites are the brightest part of the photo. We also have these two little triangles. These triangles represent what we call clipping. Clipping is where it's been so bright or so dark that the camera sensor has not been able to really record any information at all, apart from a 100% white or black square, depending on if it's bright or dark. So you can see in the blacks here, it's not lit up, it's just gray. So there's no areas in this photo that are so dark that we haven't been able to record detail. But we know we've got these really bright areas, and you can see this triangle here is lit up white. That means that we do have clipping. We do have areas where the camera could not record any detail or color. It's just 100% white. So if we click on this triangle, it's going to show us the parts in the photo where we have highlight clipping. So in all of these areas, there is no detail and no color. It's just pure white. So if we were to try to darken the photo down in Lightroom or Photoshop, then it's not going to actually be able to bring back any of the original information from what was there. The color, we can't bring the color back. So let me darken this down just to demonstrate. I'm going to bring the highlights down. Now I'm going to bring the exposure down quite dramatically. Now you see in these areas, they're not changing to green. They're leaves, they should be green, yeah? But no, it's just white and gray. Why? Because it was so bright the sensor could not record the information. This is a photo of one of the koalas at Daisy Hill. One of the good things about the center is that if you can't see the koalas from the viewing boardwalk that runs through their enclosure, you can actually go into the center, walk around and view them from the other side through the windows. So this is actually taken through one of those windows. However, if you do plan on doing some retouching, that could be Snapseed or Lightroom Mobile. If you're using a mobile phone camera and you want to edit it in your phone, I can do a tutorial on how to use those programs if you'd like. Let me know in the comments. But you could also be using Photoshop, Lightroom, if you want to upload the photos into your computer to edit. But whatever the program you're using, the principle will be the same. And that is, if you are planning on editing, then try not to lose that detail in the highlights, because once it's gone forever. So if you're planning on editing, I recommend making it a darker exposure. So let's go to a photo that I took. The next frame that I took, I made much darker. So you'll see the bright areas are still pretty bright, but I don't have any black clipping, shadow clipping. So I'm not losing any detail in the dark parts. The white parts are not so important anyway, but I want to be able to bring back as much of that as I can. So you'll see now, when I switch on this highlight clipping display, there's just this area along this railing, tiny bit of the leaves and a little bit of the leaf here. There's not that much of it, and certainly if I were to bring the exposure of those areas down, it's not going to be enough to be distracting or to make it an ugly image or anything like that. But the koala is a little bit dark, but it's much better to brighten up the dark areas than to try to draw back detail from the bright areas. So I'm going to switch that off, and let's just try to bring this dark area of the koala back up. So I'm just going to drag the shadows up, and now you can see a lot more detail of the koala and the koala's fur. I am also going to try to get as much detail back from these bright areas, so I'm going to drag the highlights down. Not too much, because really our subject is the koala, so we're putting most of our attention there. So that's already a bit better. Looking at the before and after, just with those two small changes, Okay, we're looking all right. Initially, I actually went through and did a step-by-step of how I brought this image to this point where I'm happy with the way it looks. But I figured a lot of you probably don't want to see that. But if you do want a detailed step-by-step how-to for using Lightroom, please let me know. I'm happy to film one, but only if you ask for it. I'm not going to be doing it and have nobody actually bother watching. So I'll do it if you want it. If you don't, then I won't. It's that simple. Okay, rambling on enough. If you got something out of the video, then give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any other things that I'm going to be putting on there. All of the wonderful goodness that is Brisbane and photography. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video.